Good day, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to be talking about a very difficult topic today, being the Israel-Palestine conflict. And in order to do things like that, we have to keep our heads. We have to keep our heads screwed on straight. And in order to do that, we have to pray. So I'd like to say thank you to our sponsor for this video, which is Queen of Victory Rosaries. You can see this beautiful rosary I was sent not too long ago by Queen of Victory Rosaries. You can see their shop here. And they have everything you could ever imagine as far as basically Catholic gifts are concerned. You can see they have 5-decade rosaries. They have 7 Sorrows chaplets. They have Stations of the Cross, 15-decade rosaries, St. Michael chaplet, gift sets, rosary keychains, single-decade rosary, tea diffusers if tea's your thing, and I like to drink some tea, military first responder rosaries. These are pretty great. And these are all handmade and of the highest quality. They can do custom orders. If there ever is a problem with the product, you just let them know and they replace it as long as it's general wear and tear. I'm extremely happy with what they've sent me, and I do use it every night when I'm praying the rosary with the family, and I recommend them to everybody. So please check out the link in the description for Queen of Victory Rosaries, and enjoy the show. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. There is war in the Middle East, something that we've seen all too many times before. Right now, of course, we see there is a very bloody, violent, and awful conflict going on between the Hamas-run regions of what we call Palestine and the Israeli state. And I'm not going to get into the major background of Zionism and all those sorts of things, the grievances back and forth here. But clearly what's happening is awful. What this terrorist group has done is despicable. I mean, whatever one's opinions may be about Zionism as a political philosophy, there is no justification, no matter what your political or religious affiliations are, for this type of massacring of innocent civilians. This is no good, no matter who does it. So that's just a fact that probably has to be established. But nonetheless, the question of religion, what is it with religion and war? Don't religions cause war? Isn't this another example of all of these wars caused by religions? Well, this is a classic negative stereotype about religion per se, and it's leveled at religious people who follow a particular religion as a way of discrediting their religion. They'll say, well, look, that bad person one time did something bad, and he said he was religious like you. That wouldn't be the case if religion was true, was it? Ha, got you there. These are asinine and ridiculous comments. Nonetheless, they do sway a lot of people. But here's the thing. We're going to go into the depth of this problem in a second. But just as a basic level, religion itself actually isn't the cause of violence historically in any way that even comes close to other causes of violence. And we're going to look quickly here at, this was a tweet from a guy named Zuby on Twitter. Doesn't matter, but he tweeted this response to someone who said, oh, what is it with all this religious violence? I'm sure I don't know God very well, but I'm sure he wouldn't be a fan of this, blah, blah, blah. Seems like religion is always causing war. Well, Zuby tweeted something that's known by people who can spend more than 2 minutes on Google and actually figure it out. According to the Encyclopedia of Wars, which, as you can imagine, is an encyclopedia of wars, out of the almost 2,000 known recorded historical conflicts, less than 7% had religion as their primary cause. And there you go. So, religion itself isn't even really the cause of wars per se, historically, in any significant capacity. But that still isn't enough to convince people who believe that there should be no war if religion is true. People have this cartoonish grade 9 view of religion that it's all about peace, and if there really was a God, he wouldn't let bad things happen, and blah, 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 blah. Well, there's a few things to unpack here. First, there's nothing in general religious belief per se, necessarily speaking, that says human beings don't have the capacity to do bad things. So here's a major problem with the way people talk about religion. They talk about it as if the religions themselves don't teach that people have free will. Now, there's some that teach they don't have free will, but generally speaking, people have free will according to the major world religions. So that alone should suffice to show that, well, in most cases, religious people aren't really causing a bunch of bloody conflicts. And when they do, they're doing so as as individual persons with free will who have agency to do the things they want to do, and those things are either good or bad. And that brings us to our next point. If we're going to even say something like, I don't think there should be wars because of religion, then what we're actually saying there is we're saying that we have a belief about religion that makes it that we believe that religion would not be happy with wars. And that's a completely different reality than just, I think war is bad and religions do war. Because that's really a value statement. It's a statement of standards. You're saying, as my favorite Protestant intellectual that's alive today, Pastor Doug Wilson. I don't agree with him on everything, but I do think he's a pretty good cultural critic. And he always comes back to this statement where he says, by what standard? So if somebody is saying, well, it's bad that religions are causing wars, which again we've shown is not even really the case normally speaking, but it's bad that religions are causing wars. Well, why is it bad that religions are causing wars? You're assuming that war is bad. Why is war bad? Well, what does war consist of? It consists of violence. Well, is violence good or bad? And if there's bad violence, how do we know it's bad violence? And if there's good violence, how do we know it's good violence? And you can follow this through. You get to this point where you're saying that there is good and evil in the world, and you're calling out good and evil. And what standard are you using to call that out? So here we have to make more distinctions, not just between good and evil, not just between good and bad religion, but we have to make distinctions between the various religions and whether they're all even true or not. So let's break this down. So right now what we have in the Middle East, in the Levant really, we have a Muslim group, and again, whether you believe they're true Muslims or not, they call themselves Muslims, and their actions are justified by many of the writings in Muslim authors and Quranic books and Hadith and all these kinds of things. You can find their justifications there. And you have Israelis, who Israel is not necessarily a super religious country all the way through. Zionism isn't really a religious philosophy as much as people think it is. It's actually kind of a lot more like ethno-nationalist communism than anything when you read the writings of the Zionists in the late 1800s when they were establishing this ideology. Nonetheless, obviously, Israel is very much a Jewish state. So you have, on the one side, you have Muslims. On the other side, you have Jews. Well, what do those two religions teach about war? Well, Judaism, although I believe Judaism is not a true religion in its post-temple, post-Christ sense, because the covenant is not just with the Jews, but the covenant is extended to all those baptized into the church. Judaism does have a very logical, drawn-out morality on conflict, on violence, on murder, all these kinds of things. We can find this in the Old Testament. Islam sort of does, but also Islam allows a lot of consequentialist actions. So a lot of things are permissible in Islam that are not permissible in, let's say, the basic natural law tenets that are found in the Old Testament. So in Islam, you will find justifications for things like what we'd call lying, but it's not lying if it's done in pursuit of the cause of whatever is good for the Muslim religion. Whereas in Judaism, at least in the scriptures, the Talmud's a different story. There's lots of conversations to be had on that. But at least in the scriptures, we find the basic biblical morality that is not completely fulfilled or hasn't blossomed all the way as it does with Christ, but you do find a pretty strict insistence on things having to be moral. So with the case of the Muslims, we can say that we believe what they're doing is wrong, but we can also say that their religion at least can be used pretty easily to justify some of the things that are done in the name of Islam. Not everything, but some of the things. Okay, well in that case we can say we shouldn't even really be saying religion is the cause of war. We should be saying a particular religion seems to have justifications for things that we know are evil because of our beliefs that are not encompassed in that religion. If we're saying that what Hamas is doing is wrong, and Hamas is saying that their religion shows that it's fine, then we have to say, well, we have a different religion and theirs must not be true. Otherwise, we have no basis to say that what they're doing is wrong. Now, when it comes to the Jewish question with Israel, Israel as a state has done many evil things over the years. They've committed atrocities themselves. It is not the Israel of the Bible, and evangelical Christians need to cool it on that. Nonetheless, we can judge the actions of the various Israeli military operations and human rights abuses over the years, and in fairness, we can use the morality of the Old Testament to say that what they're doing is wrong. So even in that case, if we were to say that Israel itself was the cause of conflicts, and we were to say that they did so in the name of religion, we can actually use the religious beliefs found in the Old Testament to condemn the actions of those who profess to have them, which is a completely different situation when it comes to the Muslim question. Now, if we extend this further and we talk about Christianity, well, here is where we have a different paradigm, where we have a more robust vocabulary to talk about these things of good and evil. Because within the Christian tradition, we have developed, what has been developed, is the just war theory. And this theory was basically developed most famously by St. Augustine. St. Augustine is a saint who is very important to me, and I love him very much, and I have a devotion to him. So his views on war I find to be very edifying. Cole's notes, essentially, there is such thing as a just war because the natural law allows for us to defend our property. Our property could be one place, it could be many places, it could be many properties attached together. We could try to stop some sort of moral evil that was harming other people, and we might have to use force to do so. There's many things that you could, many situations you could come up with where you could see by the basic laws of what is self-defense, what is righteous offense, those kinds of things, you could find a way to see there could be some sort of just war. But often war is a lot more complicated than that. What we find often within military conflicts is that the conflict itself may not actually be just, but the actions of the individual soldiers may be justified. And I think that's the best way we can look at this situation right now in the Levant. If I'm being honest, when I look at the claims that Israel makes for having a Zionist country, I find them specious and I find them unsatisfying. The history of Zionism is not some biblical, miraculous, heroic thing of, the promised land for the Jews. It's not that at all. It's a it's a political movement. And as I said, it very much had its roots in something like a revolutionary movement when that was common around the rise of communism. For example, one of the figures who was very enamored with Zionism, or at least intrigued by it, was Trotsky, a famous communist in the Soviet Union. And he left the Zionist circles and sort of adopted the communist religion, basically, and then became very suspicious of Zionists because he thought they were basically competitors. You can see that the kind of roots and the kind of beginnings there. The state of Israel is very much a manufactured state in the post-war era by various imperial powers. Now, none of that means that the people who live there don't have any right to live there. It is the case that people over the years and in civilizations over time, there are changes to borders. There are people who come in and kick other people out and whatever. And whether or not those things are done rightly, the point is that people live there. And if you're there for a certain amount of time, you just kind of live there, and that's your home. And if somebody attacks your home, well, if they attack your home, then you have the right to defend it. So on the one hand, Israel does have a pretty sordid past when it comes to their Zionist activities. On the other hand, the way that the various terrorist groups out of Gaza and the various Palestinian spots have acted over the years has been egregious, and it's been completely unjustified. Even if your land is being occupied by somebody, there's no right to sort of go after innocent women and children. That's just completely insane. No one can do that. Furthermore, there is a case to be made that since most of Palestine was largely speaking uninhabited, not all of it at all, but a lot of it was, there wasn't really the sort of strict boundaries of nation state that were understood by others. There is an argument to be made that the grievances and the claims by the various Palestinian groups over the years aren't really fully fleshed out either. The point being is that this region is part of a very complex and complicated and almost incomprehensible history that is very hard for us to understand in our present nation states that we're so used to. At any rate, all of this is to say that this situation in the Middle East is extremely complicated, and the only way we can really assess this situation going forward, whether or not the various countries themselves are actually justified in what they're doing, is really by using the Christian understanding of just war. And this is one thing that makes me really nervous when I see a lot of these evangelical Christian types, taking this black and white view that Israel is a place that must be defended against all odds and that we should basically wipe the Palestinian peoples off the map. This is absurd and this is completely unchristian. Again, Hamas is a despicable group and there's no justification for any of the things that they've done, because no matter what someone's grievances are, even if they're justified, I'm speaking hypothetically here, even if they're justified, there is no justification for that sort of activity. It can't be done. So no matter what somebody believes about who's right or wrong, the natural law still has to be followed, and Hamas is clearly an evil group. At the same time, even if Hamas is an extremely evil group, you can't advocate for an all-out assault that is unyielding on civilians, innocent people, because of the actions of someone who's essentially an exploitative power that exploits the plight of a particular people. This only makes things worse. And this leads me to my last point here. Of all this talk about, is there violence inherent in religion? Does religion cause war, and so on and so forth? Well, here's the thing. We've obviously shown that war itself is not, generally speaking, caused by religion, that the various religions themselves have different claims on morality that have to be assessed because, we're basically saying whether or not we believe that the wars are moral or not, which is a religious statement. But ultimately, we do live in a world that is fallen. So no matter what group is fighting another group, there does come a point where ultimately there has to be something that no religion except for the true Christian faith offers, and this is a real theology of forgiveness. You see, when you assess the various sides, let's say, in this conflict, and I'm not picking sides, and I'm not even talking about both sides having claims, I'm just saying there are two sides, just objectively speaking. When you look at the claims that they make, they're both completely convinced that the other side is Satan and they're the angels, and vice versa. And because of that, they basically believe that they're fighting a despicable enemy that is so evil that basically nothing is unjustified when it comes to what they have to do. This is a concept that is completely anathematized by the true Christian faith. Because if we are a Christian, we believe that there is a real reality of personal sin. And all of us, if I can speak in a loose sense here, all of us are much closer to being an axe murderer than we are to being a saint. And what I mean by that is all of us are a few bad decisions away from committing some sort of heinous act. And if we are honest with ourselves, we'll recognize that about ourselves. So rather than looking at others as if they're devils, we'll recognize the devil within. This is why the Christian faith offers us a true path towards forgiveness. We believe that not only can transgressions that have been done in the past, which are unforgivable in the natural sense, not only can they be forgiven because of the sacrifice of Christ, but we also believe that people who are wretched, awful sinners who hold awful ideologies and have done terrible things, we believe there is real grace to be found in the sacraments that can transform these individuals. The only way to fix this problem in the Levant region is for those there to convert to the Christian faith, and specifically to the Catholic Church. Without that, there will be no solution. Because ultimately this land in what is called Israel and what is called Palestine, depending on who you talk to, this land does not belong to the Jews. This land does not belong to the Muslims. This land belongs to Christ. And Christ was the King of the Jews, and he is the founder of the one true faith. If there is anyone who has a right to this land, it is God, and his true church is the one true church of Christ. So the only way that this will end is if we pray very hard for these individuals to convert, and in the meantime, to try to find an ability to access the truly uniquely Christian concept of impossible forgiveness, which Islam and Judaism really just can't offer. As always, let me know what you think in the comments. This has been the Kennedy Report. Until next time, God bless.